Welcome back to Network Africa. Nearly 30 people have been killed following an attack on the Chadian island of Kufua on Lake Chad. A UN official said there was an unspecified number of people displaced by Boko Haram-related violence on the island when the attackers struck around midday on a busy market day. Two of the blasts rang out from the center of the market and a third in the street as people fled. All of the bombers were female, according to security sources. Chad extended a state of emergency in the region last month after a double suicide attack that killed 12 people. Dozens of people were killed in multiple bombings in the border town of Baga in October. But new restrictions such as bans on motorized canoes aimed at stopping attacks makes it harder for aid agencies to access the roughly 60,000 displaced people who are living there. Meanwhile, the Nigerian military has carried out airstrikes against Boko Haram insurgents in the Sambisa forest. As they've informed, the military said ground troops killed several of the militants and rescued civilians, including women and children who had been held captive. The Sambisa forest along the border with Cameroon is believed to be the last major stronghold of Boko Haram. Its fighters lost towns under its control in northeastern Nigeria earlier this year, but the group continues to carry out its bombings and the military continues with its airstrikes. Let's get more perspective on this now. Joining me on Network Africa is security expert Dr. Ona Ekomu. Doctor, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
So what do you make of the military's activities so far, especially against Boko Haram? We've been hearing about airstrikes going on as well as, groundwork, the military recovering towns that had once been overtaken by Boko Haram and the rescue efforts going on. What's your take on all of these?
Well, I think the military is doing a very good job. And I think the Nigerian authorities are ramping up the fight against Boko Haram and recovering territories, lowering the jihadi flags, and putting the enemy to rout and to flight, which is how it should be. Now, we still have a situation where a little bit of territory. I think by the my last understanding, one local government is still under BH control in Borno State. But I think that should be history very soon. And I think what has really ramped up the military's effort is the deadline, the looming deadline from the president that Boko Haram should be a thing of the past by the end of this month, by the end of December 2015. Now, having said that, I think it's unfortunate, like you said in your report and like we've read in other news reports, that there's a lot of collateral casualty, incidental to the bombing raids by the Nigerian military. Well, I don't know how that can be avoided, but I think that's regrettable because the citizens that we are trying to protect, we shouldn't really be killing them, even in hot pursuit of the bad guys.
But doctor, it's quite difficult to differentiate who is a civilian and who is a member of the Boko Haram, especially when you're fighting a war such as the one that we're faced with in northeastern Nigeria. But we're gradually coming close to the president's deadline, and President Buhari has promised to continue with the attacks even if Boko Haram is not wiped out by December. But the concern now is that it does seem like, with all of the arrests that are being made with Boko Haram, the different leaders, the financier, now we caught the cameraman, and so on, it still seems like a lot more work still needs to be done.
Yes, certainly, yes, madam. I think the problem here is we might be able to win the frontal assault. We might be able to capture all the military objectives that we have established, that the government has established for itself against the enemy. But it remains a very lethal force because it can continue to carry out all these guerrilla attacks at will. Just this past weekend, 5 killed in Borno State, and you just reported about 27 killed in that village in Niger State. And this is all Boko Haram attacks. Last week we had attacks in Cameroon, we had attacks in Nigeria, and then you have the Shia procession bombing and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is the asymmetric warfare, this is something we need to understand. The asymmetric conflict is ongoing. It's not abated by capturing, even if we capture the whole of Sambisa forest. I've not seen Sambisa 4 yet. But even if we did that, the asymmetric conflict is still in place. And how do you fight asymmetric warfare? You fight it through intelligence. And so the problem now is, what are we doing in terms of that? Now, take an example, the poster that the military put out announcing the identities and showing the pictures of these Boko Haram leaders. That has been very effective. That has netted more of the Boko Haram guys to the authorities than most of the other combats that we've had going on. And now we talk about the financiers being captured and so on. What kind of capital are we making out of them? Because they should be made to say what their networks are, who is their recipient, what is their conduit, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to be gleaned there. So we shouldn't just be in a haste to capture them, imprison them, and let them go, which is what the government has been doing all this while anyway. We should really be a little more cerebral about what we are doing here, and then also enroll the citizens in intelligence gathering, so that we can put this conflict behind us at the soonest time possible.
Yeah, a lot more work that really needs to be done. But recently, the Bring Back Our Girls campaign group did complain that it does seem focus has shifted from finding the Chibok girls to just fighting Boko Haram. Do you think so? Do you also share the same opinion?
Well, you know, in a complex conflict of this nature, you have to pick your fights. You have to say, okay, which one do I tackle first? I think it's, well, the girls have been seized, and it's 602 days now today that the girls were seized, and they've not been returned to their parents. Now, my own best guess is that probably many of them have died by now. Many have been sold off into some kind of slavery and married off to Boko Haram commanders and perhaps also ISIS commanders. But having said that, I think if we want to, we still owe it a duty to those girls as Nigerians and to their parents and even to the BBOG campaign, as it were, to find out what really happened to those girls. So we need to mount a very vigorous investigative operation and a very vigorous investigative activity that will be able to kind of start digging up what's happening to them. Now, you just said the people in Sambisa, collateral damage in Sambisa, some of those girls died even in the earlier collateral damage that we saw. You know, when those the troops went into Sambisa, that's before the March election, and you know, put Boko Haram to flight. So that's my thinking. I mean, nobody has confirmed that, but I think some of the people who came out of that, those 2,000 women or so who came out, they gave some testimonies about people who had died, a lot of people who died in those places. So the point I'm making here is the government needs to refocus. I think BBOG people should not go to sleep just because Jonathan is not in office. They should keep, they should speak truth to power. They should let the president know that there is still an interest in knowing what actually happened to these girls. I'm not sure it's going to be possible to bring all 200 and whatever of them back alive today, but will let us know what happened to them. They demand that their human rights must be restored in that respect because they are Nigerian citizens, and there is investigative capacity. There should be a task force that should be empaneled to deal with that specifically. So I think if we kind of keep that focus, that will get us somewhere.
You stopped right in time, Dr. Ekomo. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and joining us on Network Africa. Dr. Ona Ekomo, a security expert on the war against terror here in Nigeria. But still ahead on Network Africa, The climate change summit is going on in Paris. How it affects you and how African countries are coping with the changes. Please stay with us.